Let's find out what those trends are like, though. Let's talk to Scott Cornell, National Practice Lead for Transportation Crime and Theft Specialist at Travelers. Bracket still intact over there, Scott?
Oh, no.
It was a tough weekend.
Let's not talk about my bracket, okay? How's your bracket doing?
It was, like I said at the beginning, Sunday I was in first place, but I had no end game, so it was just a cruel mockery of circumstance. That's what it was. But Scott, it's nice to have you. It's nice to have you back. You've talked to us before about what your teams are doing to serve cargo theft, and it's a brand new season. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on now. What are the trends as it relates to some of these cargo thefts and changes in the country right now?
Yeah, it's great to be back with you guys. I think, when we talk about trends, we always go back a little bit and look at past trends and how they impact current trends or where they may dovetail. And so we always say, the economy and whatever's going on with the economy is going to have an impact, meaning the golden rule is cargo thieves are always going to steal what they know they can sell. And you guys touched a little bit on this a little earlier. I've been listening to you guys for a little while here, and you talked about potential shortages on chips and things like that. And we saw some of the impact of that. So if you go back to 2008, coming into 2008, electronics was the number one stolen commodity. A lot of people were spending money on electronics. But then the economy took a downturn, and by 2010, food and beverage was the number one stolen commodity, because when economic scenarios are rough, people will go back to the basics. They're going to feed themselves, clothe themselves, shelter themselves, and kind of, weather the storm, so to speak. And food and beverage stayed in that number one spot because they found out it's a great commodity to steal. It's hard to trace. The evidence disappears. Well, you fast forward to 2020, and we saw big spikes in 2020 on theft. And what did we see take that number one category was household goods, because what did we hear during the pandemic? People were staying home. They were changing things at their house. They were building home offices. They were, making changes to their home. And so cargo thieves recognized this. They targeted those things. Then we move into 2021, and we see, a shortage of electronics and availability of chips and things like that. And so in 2021, we saw big spikes in the theft of electronics, especially in that Southern California area. A lot of it were pilferage-based thefts where they were just taking part of the loads. But electronics was significantly targeted. And coming into 2022, electronics is still in that targeted area and still probably in that number one category. We'll see for sure when we see the first quarter numbers play out. But, it's a demand thing. And when things are short, or when things, we're going to see household goods still in that top three. We're going to see food and beverage remain in that top three. And so we talk about what are the high target loads, not just the high value, but what are the high target loads?
Yes, let's talk about that a little bit, the high target or high theft categories that are there. Can you tell us what you mean by that, and how do you guys determine that? And how can I, as a shipper, determine what that is?
Absolutely. So that I go back to that 2008 reference. Coming into that, a lot of people in the industry, or a lot of businesses, a lot of companies, the industry term was HVL, high value load. And companies would use a specific dollar amount to trigger that in their daily business. And it can be different for everybody. It could be $100,000 value on a load, 150, 200,000. And they kind of looked at that as, at this number, we're going to start to see more targeting for theft. And it might have been true for a while. It was true for a while, to be honest, when electronics was in that number one slot for so long. But then we saw food and beverage take over. And as we traveled around the country, meeting with clients or speaking and teaching, and food and beverage was in that number one category, we said to a lot of people, hey, how many of you are operating under a high value load trigger? And almost everybody would confirm that that's what they were doing. And then we'd say, okay, what's the average value of a load of food or beverage? And that would range anywhere between 75,000 to maybe 125, 150,000 if you were getting up there on some frozen meats and things like that, which means maybe the security protocols that they had in place at that 150 mark and up weren't being used for the number one targeted commodity. So when we work with our clients, we teach them HTL, high target. What are the target commodities in the top 5, top 10? and how are you going to build your security and your preventive measures around those categories.
So, Scott, what would some of those preventative measures be?
Well, let's talk about food. I think food is a great one. And I know when you spoke last with my colleague, Elizabeth, talked a little bit about, food and perishables. So when you talk about prevention with food, you have to even just take into account a seal. A broken seal can become a real issue. If a load of perishables or consumables arrives with a broken seal on it, a lot of people are concerned about, what's the integrity of the load? Is there, has that load maybe been pilfered? So did they take a couple of boxes off the back? And what does that mean for the entire load? And when you talk about commodities like food and beverage, nobody really wants to take a chance on that type of a commodity. So if you have a pilferage where maybe they only took a few boxes off the back, you could end up losing that entire load because nobody wants to put that back into the supply chain, or it needs to be destroyed. And that depends on what your contract situation is, what your arrangement is with your shipper. But so we encourage, hey, you have to have some prevention just on the seal alone. Now, we want prevention overall on the load, but let's use seal locks. Let's, have high security rear door locks that can make sure and guarantee, even if the seal is broken, that we know that the doors weren't opened and we know nobody had access to those types of loads. So when it comes to those perishables and those consumables, prevention is really key, because even if you don't lose the entire load, you might lose the entire load.
Yeah. The integrity being compromised is a big thing. Awesome stuff, Scott. I love it. Before we close, can we get any parting thoughts on what you can expect looking forward to 2023?
Sure. I think if all things are normal, if you can even talk about cargo theft in the category of being normal, right? We should see a shifting back to food and beverage sometime in 2022. But if some of the things that you talked about earlier come true, with a shortage on chips or conductors or anything like that, then we could see that target commodity stay in that front runner. And what's really critical is monitor what's going on, monitor what's in demand. And if you're moving that, you're hauling that, then you probably need to have some significant preventive measures. And what is your plan? Do you have a plan to prevent, and do you have a plan to react? And are you getting involved in industry organizations like TAPA, as an example, the Transported Asset Protection Association, that is a nonprofit organization out there that sets global standards on supply chain security and prevention? Are you accessing resources like that are going to help you with that plan? And work with your carrier. We work with our clients on a daily basis to help teach them prevention, and we're there to recover it, with our cargo theft investigation team if they were to have a loss.
Thank you very much, Scott. Everyone check out Travelers, and I would say good luck with your bracket, but you've told us it's already decimated. So Scott, you just have a good day regardless. Take care. We'll get to you next time, buddy.
Take care.
Always next year.
There's always next year. I hope there is at least.